No matter what your personal Notion system is focused on, sleep is kind of the glue that holds everything together. Whether you're journaling or building a habit tracker or a task manager, sleep shows up everywhere. That's why in this video, I want to take specifically this puzzle piece and show you exactly how to build it. You can grab your free template in the description and integrate it into any system that you'd like. It's going to be a full step-by-step tutorial, so if you're new to Notion, you're going to learn a ton about formulas, displaying data, aggregating it, and all kinds of things. I'll include the timestamps for this video so you can jump around, and also I'll be speaking and coding in a natural pace for me, so feel free to increase the playback speed to whatever you feel is right for you. Anyway, let's dive in. So let me first show you what it is that we're going to be building. As with the tracking of anything, we're going to be starting with time cycles. So we're going to have days and weeks in this case. But once you learn the techniques in this video, you're obviously going to be able to add months and quarters and etc. So for this specific template, I'm only going to be focusing on the sleep aspect of it. This is how the days are going to look like. We're going to have this nice display, and if we go into a specific day, this is the data entry. So you're just going to be simply inputting this stuff in this kind of format every morning, and then the rest is going to be calculated. And not only that, but also if we look into the weekly stuff, so this is how a week is going to look like. This is the week itself, so it pulls the data from all the days that compose the week. So you can see these are all the days inside of the week, and we get this nice visual as well with all the averages and other information. And when it comes to days, there's some color coding for when you didn't sleep enough, whether it's red or yellow. And by itself, this is not super impressive, but this is the kind of stuff that you're going to need for almost any Life OS system that you're building. This is an example of combining it with some of the other health tracking. So you can add weight and steps and other stuff to it, along with maybe you're tracking your energy or performance or diet. So you could have something like this where you're inputting morning data and evening data, and obviously sleep is a major part of it. And if we look into weeks, then you can kind of see how it's also focused around sleep, but now we're converting this into not just sleep metrics, but in general health metrics. Or if you combine that with journaling and setting focuses for the day and doing some pros and cons at the end of the day, you can see that this tracking of sleep is also a big part of it. And on the weekly scale, it would look something like this. You can see that there is a lot of extra data, but still at the very center of it is also tracking the key health metrics, which sleep is obviously a big part of it. Today, we're only going to be focusing on the sleep. This is the part, and we're going to be starting from almost scratch. Let me show you the starting position, and then we can start from there. We're going to have days that are so far empty, and we're going to have weeks. So we have 1 week, we have 7 days. If we look into each specific day, then you're going to notice that it basically is just a placeholder. It doesn't really have properties, and is just related to the week. And if we look into the weeks, same story. All it has is just a collection of days, just like scaffolding for how this is going to look like. And we're just going to build the whole thing from the ground up. Keep in mind that you can grab your free template right in the description, but if you want to learn this stuff, I suggest you actually follow along with me, maybe building it up from scratch, because we're going to learn a ton of interesting Notion stuff as we build it. And this is the stuff that's going to generalize way beyond tracking your sleep. I'm just going to speak naturally and code it along the way, but if you want to speed it up, you can obviously click and watch it at 1.5x or 2x. Let's get started. First things first, we need some properties where we're actually going to be entering our sleep data. So let's just go ahead and do that. So it's going to be a number. Let's start with, let's say, HRV for the beginning. Icon, good. Another, also number. That's going to be our sleep score. Then we're going to need a property where we enter our sleep start. So this is going to be sleep start. Let's pick this icon. Then we're going to have sleep end. Then also we could have been waking up during the night. So let's add another property. That's going to be a number. It's going to be minutes awake. So let's give that a timer icon. Good. Let's just narrow these a little bit. Good. And now we can also be taking a nap during the day. So let's add nap start. Similar to sleep start, we're going to have nap start and nap end. Now, the reason we're adding these as text properties instead of a date or something like that is because naturally we don't really want to be, let me just give you that as a quick demo. If we add a date, that means every time we want to be inputting our start date, we're going to have to be inputting the whole thing plus include time, go here and input it here. That would be just a giant pain in the ass. We don't want to do that. We're probably going to have something like an Oura ring or whatever sleep tracker that you use, and you probably want to input your, sleep time just like this. You fell asleep at 11:34 and you woke up at 9:30, whatever, and you had 5 minutes of awake time. Now, that took me like 5 seconds. If I was entering it as a date, that would be a pain in the ass. So let's clean this up and let's also narrow these down a little bit. Okay, nice. So now let's just enter some data. Let's say my HRV was 673, sleep score was 88. I fell asleep at 11:50 and woke up at 7:36. Minutes awake, let's just say there were no minutes awake and I didn't take any naps. That was super easy. Now into the difficult stuff. Now we're going to be writing some formulas. Let's start working on our nice display of data that we want to see here. And so far, we haven't done any calculations, so we can't really do math on these numbers because they're just strings. So we actually are going to be converting them to decimal points. But before we do that, let's start getting at least some display of data. So let's add a new formula. Let's call it sleep and let's call it display. And inside, we're going to have the display at least for the stuff that we already inputted. And actually, in fact, let's just add, let's say we were awake for 10 minutes and we also napped from, 1:35 to, let's say, 1:49. Okay, so now we've entered all the data and we can start working on a display. So at the top of the formula, I usually like to add some variables that I'm going to be using. Usually it's a shorter version. And also I'm often working on these formulas outside of Notion, just in some code editor. So it's easier to refer to variables like so. Then I'm going to add just a couple of conditionals. So for example, sleep recorded, we're going to need that to check for whether we need to display some stuff or not. And it just checks if sleep start was entered and sleep end was entered. And if either one is not, then we consider sleep isn't recorded. And let's add the same condition for nap recorded. Here we go. Now, without making any calculations so far, we can enter a sleep range, at least to note visually that we slept from this time to this time, just as they were entered. So I would enter them like so. Using a little arrow symbol, I would just define sleep range. And now let's just make it look a little nicer. So we can add a little emoji to that and it would look something like this. And now let's add the same display to the nap range. Now you notice we actually have an if condition inside of each display, because if we haven't entered our sleep data, then we just want to be showing empty string in the sense that we don't want to be showing anything. And we're going to use the same logic for HRV and awake time and sleep score, etc., because we want to only be showing in our display formula only the stuff that was entered. This is how our awake time display would look. We check if minutes awake is more than 0, and in that case we show the display for minutes awake. And let's do the same for HRV. Exactly the same. We check first, then we show the display. And let's do the same for the sleep score. Okay, this is looking good. Now we can actually put this whole thing together into one single display. We can do it by the following formula. We can put it all in one array and then join the array into a single string by the character of \n, which represents new lines. So if we click done, this is the display that we're going to have. There's one little problem with that, and that is if some data is missing. So if I remove minutes awake, you see that this is not quite what we want, because we want to actually filter out that thing altogether, and we can do that just by adding this filter here. So in this case, when I hit done, you see this empty line just disappears, and if I add minutes awake, then it's there. And same happens for anything else. If I remove nap start, that whole line disappears. Same goes for HRV, etc. So this is all fine and well, but so far we're basically just displaying the stuff that we've entered as strings. What we want to be doing now is actually be doing some calculations on this. And this is not only to calculate the total sleep time that we were having, because we slept X number of hours and minutes per night and we had a nap. We want to display the durations per night and per nap, and also we want to display the total duration. So we need to make calculations for that, and we can't really do calculations on just a string 23 column 50. So we want to be converting them to decimal points. Let's do that, and for the night sleep, let's introduce variables for those, because we want to be aggregating those into weeks. So we want to have our sleep start as a separate variable on days, because then we can aggregate all the days into weeks and have an aggregate sleep start average for the entire week, which is quite useful for display. It's going to be super easy to do on something like HRV, because that's already a number, but in terms of sleep start and sleep end, we want to add separate variables to that. Let's start by adding a new formula, and let's call it sleep start decimal. And here the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take and split this property on this symbol. So this is going to give us an array of 2 items. So if I click done, you're going to see that it gives us an array of 23 and 50. So 23 is the first element of an array, 50 is the second. That means we can access the hours and minutes. Now we have hours separately and minutes separately as a variable, and we just grabbed those not only as a first element, but we also converted them to a number, because by default those are strings. So all we have to do now is convert the whole thing to a decimal. That's very easy to do. We just take the hours and we add minutes divided by 60 to it. And now you see this is a little, let's also round this, round 2 decimal points. Nice. So this is the thing converted to a decimal point. Oops, this one should be decimal. And now let's add another formula that's going to be almost exactly the same, sleep end decimal. Okay, so this is going to be easy, because this is going to be exactly the same. Sleep end, we split by this part, take the first one, convert to a number, takes the last one, convert to a number, and convert the whole thing to a decimal. 7.6 is exactly the answer. So now let's add a formula that would give us the duration of the night sleep. So this is going to be sleep duration. This is also going to be a decimal. Start with our typical let's, and add a couple of definitions. These are the variables that we're going to be using, and we are interested in duration. These are already decimals, so naively you could say that you woke up at some hour, you can subtract the start decimal from it. If it was something like you fell asleep at, let's say, 1 o'clock and you woke up at 7, that would be quite trivial to calculate, because you would only do sleep end decimal minus start decimal, right? And you would call it a day. That would be duration. Okay, 5.77. But if I change this back to 23, then our answer is messed up. So you can obviously see we have 2 cases here. And the way we can handle that is with a simple ternary condition. So if and is greater than start, then that would be our simple case. But for our second branch, we want to correct for the fact that you fell asleep before midnight. So we do this little math here. And then our duration is correct, 7.7. And let's also here add a little guard, meaning if either start or end time of your sleep duration was not entered, we consider the duration 0. We can do it like so with a simple if condition, and also add a little bit of rounding to it. We're done with this one, and now we can add the nap duration in a similar fashion. So we add a new formula, nap duration. For nap duration, actually, I'm not going to be introducing separate properties for nap start decimal and nap end decimal, because we're not going to be aggregating those into weeks. So I'm just going to input the whole thing into the formula here. Let's start with our quick definitions and our split on parts, and then we can get our hours and minutes. Easy enough, just like you already saw before.
We get them from parts and we convert them to a number. Then just like before, we convert them to a decimal by using hours plus minutes divided by 60. And our duration in this case would be pretty simple. It's not going to be any conditionals here because it's not like you're going to start your nap before midnight or after midnight. It's all going to be during the day. And we can do the same checking. Here we check for nap start and nap end. If both are present, then we can show the duration and round it. If not, we just consider it 0. So you can see our nap as converted to a decimal is 0.23, which is the correct answer. So now we have our nap duration and we have our sleep duration decimal. Actually, let's call this also decimal. That means if we combine those two, we get total sleep decimal. And this is not going to be a difficult formula because this is just going to be sleep duration decimal plus nap duration decimal. Nice. That's all we had to do for this one. So we've got all of our variables all in line. We have everything we need to display the duration of our night sleep, the duration of our nap sleep, and the total duration inside of this little fancy display. And also we are ready to aggregate them into weeks. Let's go ahead here and let's start by adding some variables. So we've got our sleep decimal, our nap decimal, and our total decimal. And first we want to adjust those based on minutes awake. So in fact, our total sleep is not going to be displayed by total sleep duration, but it's just going to be adjusted by minutes awake. Same goes for total sleep. First, let's convert minutes awake to decimal as well, just like so. And I added a little comment to this because this is beginning to be a quite long formula. And now let's adjust both sleep decimal and total decimal according to this minutes awake. We can do it like so. It's very simple. We got two new variables that are going to be adjusted sleep decimal and adjusted total decimal. So now we're going to be converting those to hour, column, minute format instead of these. Let's add a little comment here as well. Getting hours of sleep from the decimal is very simple. We just floor the number because if it's 23 point whatever, we just get 23. We need a little more trickery to get the minutes because now we multiply it by 60 and use the remainder operator to get the actual minutes. This is a bit of a trick, but works perfectly fine. And now we can do the same process for nap and total. Okay, we've got our minutes, hours, and minutes for all three. Now we can work on putting the display together. I added a couple of conditions here. This one is obvious. So if minutes are more than 10, we just display minutes. But if it's less than 10, then I want to prepend 0 to it because you don't want to display it as, let's say, 10 column just like 5. No, you display time like 05 would be. Here, when it's 0 hours, I display double zeros. This is why this condition is here. And now we can, once we figure this one out, we can display it in the same way for the nap duration and the total duration. Okay, so these are exactly the same. And all we need to do now is just to put them together in the same way that we've put together everything else. So let's scroll down and get to our displays, and we want to be working right here. So here's my total sleep display with a nice icon and title. And here's my total sleep breakdown, which is if we also had nap recorded, then I just display this amount we got at night and this amount we got as a nap. Let's now see how it looks. I can just go here and add them, click done, and now we're getting this nice display. This is already looking really good, and it kind of gives us all the information. One small addition I would make to that is I would just play around with the coloring a little bit. So if I slept very little, I want to have my total sleep be highlighted in something like red. Let's just add that little logic to it, and I think it's going to be fun. So let's go into where we display our total sleep right here. And in fact, we can wrap style with style. So we're going to be styling the whole thing right now. And let's do this style. And we want to wrap this thing. And then we're going to have our color logic. And here for this one, we want to use ifs. So now we want to work on the logic of the total sleep duration in decimal. For me, if for example my total duration was like less than 5 hours, I want to display it in red. And if it was more than 5 but less than 7.5, let's display that in yellow. And of course, if everything was nice and smooth, meaning more than 7.5, then we just displayed in white. And we are missing a comma here. Let's press done and let's check if it works. So if I change our wake up time to 5, then it's going to be yellow, and if I change it to 3, it should be red. Nice. And let's add this display here. So we go to property visibility, display. Okay, this is looking pretty good. I probably also make it bold because this is the most important information. So let's add a B right here. Done. Okay, this is slightly better. That's all when it comes to days. Now we can work on a fun part of aggregating that data into weeks. So let's go to our week. We see this week has all the days linked to it and they're already displayed here. Let's actually also add the display here. Okay. And you can see a bit of a problem here. So this should just not be displayed. Apparently we forgot to add a condition to that. Let's look into that. Yeah, right here. So you notice we had these checks everywhere. So apparently here we forgot to have that one. So let's add an if around this block. So that would be around this block. And let's add a condition if sleep recorded. And if it wasn't recorded, then we just display an empty string. So when I click done, you see poof, they're all gone. Now let me just add some mock data to these days just so it looks a little more realistic. Okay, so it looks a little nicer. And let's just quickly recap what it is that we want to do at the weekly level. So obviously we want to have the same nice display on the left. It's going to be slightly different because it's going to be weekly averages, and we also want to get those weekly averages. So we want to get an average HRV for the week, sleep score, the average time when we went to bed, the average time, the total sleep time that's average, and the average wake up time, because we want to prioritize consistency of bedtime, consistency of awake time, and obviously want to average all the metrics that we can that are plain numbers. So let's start by adding a property to calculate the average sleep start time. So sleep start decimal. And let's start with the formula. First, let's get all the entries of map it to the sleep start decimal. But not only that, we only want to get the entries that are more than 0. So if you remember when we were writing our sleep start decimal, if the data wasn't entered, we would just default to 0. So in this case, those would be included in our mapping, and we just want to filter those out. That's our entries. Then we actually want to remap them once again, and if any of the sleep start time is after midnight, meaning like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever, just for average purposes, we want to add 24 to it, because you can't average 23 and 1 o'clock. That's not going to work. So you want to convert something like 1 o'clock to 25, and then the averages would work. Then doing the average itself is very easy. We have the sum of the adjusted entries and the length of them, meaning the total number. And for a final average, we want to actually subtract 24 if the average was more than 24. So if the average was something like 25, that would be actually 1 o'clock. And for a final point, we just want to round it to get the numbers. So let's hit done and let's see if it works. Yeah. So this would be our average sleep start time as a decimal for the entire week. Now let's do the same for sleep end decimal. Let's add a formula, sleep end decimal. And when we edit it, it's going to be very similar. We do the same mapping, we do the same filtering, but in this case, it's a sleep end. So there is no before midnight, after midnight crap that we have to take care of. So we just do the average and the rounding, and we're done. Now let's do the same average for the total sleep decimal, formula, exactly the same, very simple, just an average, and we're done. Let's do the same quick formulas for HRV. So this would be our HRV, converted, filtered and averaged. We just want to round it. And the same for sleep score. This would be our sleep score formula, added formula, and here it is, exactly the same. Now for some of these, you could use plain roll-ups, but I'm just keeping stuff consistent because sometimes you do want to add some filtering, some mapping, some logic. So I'm just keeping everything as a formula in this case. And for me, another really cool property that I like adding for weeks is sleep start deviation. What I mean by that is, in my mind, I have an ideal time for when I'm supposed to get to bed, and I'm trying to get to bed at that time every day, regardless of the day of the week. And on a weekly time scale, I like adding a property that just shows me in one number how far from that ideal time am I. So let's add that. It's going to be also a formula, sleep start deviation. And for this, okay, so to start with, let's define our ideal sleep start time. So for me, it's 23 o'clock, 11 p.m. Then we get all the sleep starts, just like we did before for the sleep start average. And then we want to define our total variability, meaning the collective sum of deviations day by day. So let's take our entries and map them to here. Actually, inside of map, we can use another let to use a variable just inside of let. Because as you remember, we need to adjust our sleep start time. So if it's after midnight, we want to add 24 to it just for the math to work. And then our deviation is very simple. We get that sleep start and we sub ideal sleep start. So if it was like 25 minus 23, that would be 2. Or maybe if it was 22 minus, it would be minus 1, right? And then we do absolute on that. And then we can sum them all together. So just do dot sum on the whole thing, and that will give us the total variability. So if we add this, click done, you're going to see that our total variability is 5 hours. But now, of course, we're not interested in total variability because we want to divide that by the number of entries. So we do that and we round it and we hit done, and now we can see that our average deviation from our ideal sleep start time is 0.72. Now we're going to later convert it to a nice display of hour, column, minutes. And now we have all the data that we need. Now we can start working on our nice display of sleep. So let's add that property formula, sleep display, and let's start working on that. We can add a bunch of variables and now we can convert them to a proper time format. You're already familiar with that. We just get the hour by flooring the total sleep, and we get the minute by multiplying it by 60 and using the remainder operator on 60. And this is for the total sleep. Now we can do the same for the sleep start and the others. So now we've got the hours and the minutes for the total, the sleep start, the sleep end, and the deviation itself. Putting them together just like we did before with our couple conditionals, adding the column and the minutes. This was for the total sleep. Now let's add the rest. We have our total sleep formatted, sleep start, sleep end, and deviation. Now we can just start assembling the whole output. We can add our sleep display. So if the total sleep was more than 0, then we want to not only display the total sleep as we formatted it, but also we want to add a new line and break down the average time we went to bed and the average time we woke up, and we wrap the whole thing in a conditional. Now let's also add a display for the sleep score. Very similar, we check if it's not empty, and if it's not, then we add our little display. And we can do the same for sleep deviation, looking exactly the same, checking if the total sleep is more than 0. Also, if none of the sleep entries were entered, then we don't want to be displaying this. And we also want to display our HRE with the same check. And now we're ready to put everything together just like we did on the days. So we put each thing into an array, we filter out the empty strings, and we join by doing new lines. So I hit done, and we have this nice display that we can now go here, display, and show it. So now during our weekly review, we can easily see our average sleep start time, the total number of hours of sleep we got, how close we were to our ideal sleep start time, HRV, and sleep score. All the data is laid out, not only the weekly averages, but then if something is off, we can drill down and see like, oh shit, like on Sunday, we really messed up. Whatever system in Notion that you're building that's related to your personal life, you're almost certainly going to be tracking some of this stuff. So if you're trying to build your Life OS from scratch, I think this is a great exercise, a great starting point. And also, it would work really well if you watch a video that I did on best way of starting in Notion. You can easily add this stuff to it. And if you want to track more health metrics like weight and steps and some of the other stuff, you can easily track them in a similar fashion. And the stuff that you learn from formulas here, man, like this is almost everything that you need to know about Notion formulas. If you're comfortable writing those formulas that we had today, like there's really not a whole lot more complicated things that you need to learn if you got those. But this is it for this video. You can click the link in the description. There is a template. You can get all the formulas and just use them in any way that you want. But I hope that was useful. And if you have any suggestions for what it is that you want me to cover later, you know, maybe building a habit tracker from scratch or building a complete health metrics tracking or aggregating that into higher level timeframes like months and quarters and years, drop a comment and I'll be happy to look into it. So anyway, good luck on your optimization journey.